And welcome into the Four Oracles podcast, episode 167 here for this Thursday, March 5th, 2026. How about that? First show of March. Of course, that means since we are in the first week of March, we are, of course, now in meteorological spring. So happy spring to all of you who follow the meteorological calendar. Big show for you guys today. I know we didn't do a show Tuesday. Scheduling issues. Apologies for that. But unfortunately, we could not do a traditional show on Tuesday. So only one show this week. No extra pod. We'll do this next week. So if you're new here, of course, welcome in. We do this show twice a week here on Thursdays and Tuesdays usually, schedule permitting. A lot of things to discuss here, guys. A lot of things to discuss. Biggest stories in college football in 2026. What are they? We're going to start trickling through some of those. We have a few more to talk about. Lou Holtz, the legendary head coach at Arkansas and Notre Dame, ESPN analyst on college football final. He has since passed away. He passed away yesterday. Get some thoughts on him here in a moment. We have reasonable expectations. Oregon on deck. Then we will finish up with college football historical what-ifs. Very loaded show for you guys today. A lot of things are happening out there. Not really the sports, but sometimes you need a little vacation from that type of stuff and kind of escape from reality sometimes. But I'll just say, man, it's been a really weird about 4 or 5 days or so. Very, very weird in terms of the national news, if you will. But anyway, of course, you have college football at the moment. Everything's fine in college football world, but we'll see. Again, if you're new here, welcome to the show. Be sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to. Not a requirement, but if you want to. But be sure to follow us on social media as well if you do choose to follow or subscribe to the channel. X, Twitter, Instagram, all those places you can find us. Podcast feed, same thing. You can find us over there as well. That's where we do our extra pods, which we didn't do any this week. We'll do some next week, I think. And, of course, we do our typical shows here on YouTube and on Spotify. So be sure you are aware of that. So without any doubt, let's get into it here. So biggest stories in college football, right? 2026. We're past 2025. The season's over with now. At least the games are done with the national championship. What biggest stories in college football? Of course, we're doing the reasonable expectations. That's not the same thing as the big stories, right? So the big stories are just kind of like the overarching stuff. Like what things are we looking forward to? I guess, like big stories, anything off the field, on the field, we'll talk about it. First one here, LSU. Can they win year one of Lane Kiffin? That's a big story I'm following. Of course, Lane Kiffin comes over from Ole Miss to LSU. You know, sort of a change over there of the rivalry there with Ole Miss and LSU, but he's there now at LSU. Bring in fantastic transfer class, at least on paper. We'll see what happens on the field. But bring in Sam Leavitt. You keep Blake Baker still as a DC, then leave. And you bring in or you inherit a fairly good roster. I don't recall a lot of those LSU players really leaving the roster. I think the roster and Lane Kiffin is inheriting is fairly good, and I think is good enough to win in year one. Not win the national championship, but at least to get LSU back to where the fan base wants you to be at, right? So thinking around 10 wins, 9 wins, probably in that ballpark. I know last year was, and then, last year and the year before were not norm. Now, granted, some of that is we have to maybe change a little bit of your expectations in terms of where the sport is now if they expand the playoff. But still, I think LSU fans would want 9 wins, 10 wins, or more instead of what you've been gotten the last couple of years, right? So I think Lane Kiffin there could be set up to win. We'll see. That's the big storyline there. Next one here is the one that sounds like we're recycling from last year, but trust me or not, what will Florida State do in Mike Norvel's future, right? Of course, Florida State last year got off to a great start. We all thought, oh, man, they're like 5-0, 4-0. They're like in the top 10, top 15 in the country in the rankings. Oh, man, this is great. Going so well. And then all of a sudden, reality hits you. You lose to Virginia, lose to Pitt. You didn't make it to a bowl game. You get destroyed by a Florida team that was a zombie team, right? So that's a big question. What's Florida State's future going to be with Mike Norvel? What's he going to end up doing? He's going to be let go? Is he going to be allowed to continue? I think the sentiment, we've talked about Florida State a lot, actually a lot more than I didn't realize. But if you're new here, the sentiment with Florida State is it's kind of one of those, screw it, let's get through it. It's going to be a lost season anyway. So that's the sentiment over there in Tallahassee. I don't know. It's a very, very strange situation there. I want Florida State to be really good, man. I want them to be competitive and competing for national championships. It's just unfortunate that what they have done in the current model they're using, or the current model they've been using for the past couple of years under Norvel, well, it's giving you success, right? It's giving you, the highest of the highs, right? Undefeated regular season and ACC championship game and appearance, and you win it, along with the 10-win season before. But it's also giving you the lowest of the lows, a 2-win season, I believe a 3-win season this first year, 5 wins, losing to an FCS team. So you have had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Like, it's really weird for Florida State. You've gotten some of the best seasons you've had recently, but you've also had historically bad seasons, right? Like in a 2-win season, losing to Jacksonville State his second year when they were FCS. So I don't know. I mean, that's a question, or at least a story that I think a lot of us in college football who are not Florida State fans even are going to pay attention to. And then, of course, the unfortunate thing is, well, does that job open up? And, well, it's not unfortunate, but, sucks to see Norvel go, knowing that, he's a good man. And, I've never met him before, but just from folks who've interacted with him, he's not like an asshole or anything like that. But we're trying to see what they do if there is a regime change there, in terms of, will they bring in, of course, every discussion there would be, will they change out the athletic director? Michael Alford, who is also in a lot of hot water. A lot of other Florida State folks have expressed their concerns about him. If you want to know more about that, just go look up Mike Alford, Florida State future at the school. And then finally here is Virginia Tech, staying in the ACC. Virginia Tech. Those of you don't remember, they hired James Franklin. Okay, so James Franklin gets fired from Penn State. He's available. Virginia Tech has been, at least at the time when they hired him, was sort of bubbling beneath the surface, and it turns out he's going there, right? It's interesting that James Franklin's going from rebuilding, and yes, we'll give him credit where credit is due here. He rebuilt Penn State, after the whole scandal. And I know Bill O'Brien did some work there in terms of getting them back to winning games, at least keeping them stable. But James Franklin did the heavy work, got them to multiple Big Ten championships, had several big bowl appearances. I think won one of them. So he went from rebuilding a national power that was relevant in the 90s to going to another national power that was relevant in the early 2000s and the 90s. I mean, I wouldn't consider Virginia Tech a national power, but certainly a very powerful program that, if tapped, if their potential is tapped correctly, they could be a very formidable force in the ACC. Now, granted, the over discussion there is, of course, is the ACC going to survive much longer? That's whoever discussion. I don't think we're ready to say what the official, I guess, I don't know, I guess like the official ruling there on the ACC. But as the ACC is currently constructed, Virginia Tech would be a very, very formidable foe if they tap into the resources they have there, the recruiting pipelines, the money resource. Now, knowing that I think it was the president last year of Virginia Tech said, hey, look, we really want to invest in college football. We really, really want to. And they're doing that, bringing in James Franklin, bringing in a lot of high-quality players. Like I said before, and I'll say it again multiple times down the road until we get the season kicked off, are we going to see James Franklin 2.0? Because a lot of folks are saying after last year, and we'll kind of dive into this again, believe it or not, the CFB college football what-ifs section, were we going to see James Franklin 2.0 at Penn State last year? Now, we didn't get to see that because he didn't get to finish the year as a head coach. He got fired, after the Northwestern loss, right? So we didn't get to see really James Franklin 2.0. We get to see that at Virginia Tech. So does that mean that, hey, what happened last year with bringing in the certain personnel like Jim Knowles, and a couple years before that, Andy Kolnicki, does he sort of rectify those mistakes and say, hey, I'm not doing that again, we're going a different direction? By the coaching staff, he didn't hire those guys, so it looks like he's going a different direction a little bit. He, by the way, too, promoted, or not promoted, but kept, what's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? Let me up here. Why am I blanking on his name? I know it was the Virginia Tech second coach last year who was the coach, and why am I forgetting his name? I should know this. Brent Pry. Yeah, Brent Pry. There we go. Oh, I blinked on his name. I guess it's been crazy here. But yeah, Brent Pry. So he retains him, so he's now the defensive coordinator, which he was under James Franklin at Penn State. So they're back together again. That's a weird situation, but yeah, that's a story that I'm looking to very, very interested in. Is this Virginia Tech James Franklin thing? be fascinating to watch. And that's just a small sample size of stories we can go on to. And who knows? Maybe this will be a whole new segment. I know we'll eventually do our spicy predictions here again soon, but a lot of things to talk about. Everyone says this is the quiet period of college football. A lot of things to discuss. Those are some stories that I am fascinated to watch for the upcoming season. Again, these stories can be on the field or off the field, right? They can be any story that involves college football. So those are 4 big ones that I am focused on. At least the first 4 big ones. There's more to come here. Well, I guess we're announcing this will be a new segment. So how about that? So again, as we sort of move on here to the next segment, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, you don't have to, but if you want to, be sure to do so. The buttons like somewhere on the screen, like down here, somewhere, I don't know. Of course, if you don't want to have notifications turned on, that's fine. Again, we are independent media. So if you're looking for a college football show that's not tied to any media conglomerates, come to us. We are that. And then, of course, be sure to follow us on the socials as well. These should be on the channel description. If you just go to our channel and go to the more info tab or whatever it's called, you should be able to find more info there for our social media presence. Actually, trying to see if there's anything I'm missing here. No, I don't think so. So again, I apologize for not having those show Tuesday. Just the schedule's been really, really busy. We haven't had a chance to do a show this week. Should be a little bit calmer next week. I have it on good authority. Anyway, yeah. So this is what I wanted to. I was very, very. Well, not surprised. Very sad to hear this news. So, Lou Holtz has passed away. The legendary head coach at a lot of different places. So South Carolina, most recently. Of course, that's when before he retired. Notre Dame, most notably for a large period of time. And then, of course, at Arkansas as well, briefly. He has since passed away. And actually, let me scratch my ear real quick here. There we go. Audio issues are fine on Spotify. Just my ear was itching there. But yeah, Lou Holtz has passed away. Of course, like I was saying, head coach at Notre Dame, most notably South Carolina, later half of his career. And then at Arkansas. Of course, most people remember him being on College Football Final. Right, you know him, Mark May, Reese Davis, the glory days, if you will, of that show. Now it's, I mean, they still have it, but it's not the aura, if you will, as the kids say it, is not there anymore. So I mean, yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia. I mean, my college football viewing experience really grew in like 2011, 2012. Really started going in 2013, and I have fond memories of watching Mark May and Lou Holtz. Those guys interacting. There's still, I think, some episodes that are out there on YouTube, but they've been taken down due to copyright. I think there's one that was available for a very, very long time, which was their reaction to the App State upset over Michigan in 2007. That whole episode was available on YouTube, and I think it's since been taken down because of copyright, unfortunately. But it's about it's been, properly, kept around in circulation for people to watch. Hopefully, some people who do have recordings of that will upload those over the coming weeks. But yeah, he has since passed away. Of course, he has retired / been like over from ESPN, and he's still been around, right? I think a lot of folks remember him more notably for the whole Ryan Day thing, which, I think a lot of that's more or less theater. Like, I don't think Lou Holtz really hates Ryan Day. I think a lot of it's just, talking points, theater, and of course, his reaction, Ryan Day when they beat Notre Dame a couple years ago. By the way, great game, by the way. But yeah, I think that's what a lot of folks will remember him most recently, up until him passing away. But and I never met him before. And out of all the figures in college football who, whether it be coaches or players like Bobby Bowden, people like him, obviously now Lou Holtz, Steve Spurrier, players like that, and coaches. Those are guys who I would love to meet. Those players, and of course you can get extended to the NFL as well, like Bo Jackson. Now for Tampa, obviously, Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber, players I've always wanted to meet, players and coaches I've always wanted to meet. Lou Holtz is up there. I never had a chance to meet him. And it's sad that he's gone. And it's unfortunate, as the quote says, as you get older, life starts to take away things from you. And a lot of memories, man, watching him on TV of him, Mark May, man. Just those segments of them breaking up the games and sort of what college football final used to be is sort of what people think of the guys who the NBA guys on NBA what's it called? It used to be on TNT, now they're on ESPN. Like Charles Barkley, Ernie Johnson, Shaq, and Kenny. That's a college football final of those guys: Reese Davis, Lou Holtz, Mark May. That was a college football version of Inside the NBA. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Inside the NBA. That was a college football version, and it's unfortunate that while yes, ESPN has sort of kept the image alive a little bit with several personalities going through it. I know at one point I think it was like Matt Berry, Dan Mullen, and Jesse Palmer. That was probably like the last time it was decently good. Then it's fallen off completely. That was back in like 2014. Actually, Lou Holtz number still around 2014. It was really 2015 and then 2016 was really where it slowly kind of started to fall off slightly, but it was still fun to watch a little bit. Actually, no, it wasn't Dan Mullen. It was Matt Berry. Was it Matt Berry? I know Joe Galloway's involved in, him and Jesse Palmer. Yeah, I think Dan Mullen was recently. Right now he's back into coaching. But, yeah, I mean, that really was from, like, 2005, 2006, all the way to 2014. That show with Mark May, Lou Holtz, and Reese Davis really was the the college football version of Inside the NBA. And we've lost that. And I don't know if we'll be able to get that back. Hopefully we will, and hopefully folks will invest more in college football and seeing how, I mean, it's not popular, is that we will get a show like that again. I just don't know if, who is that going to be, right? Is it going to be ESPN doing that, CBS, Fox, some of these other networks, right? Like On3, whatever, do something like that? I don't know. So, rest in peace, Lou Holtz. He will be missed. In terms of his personality in college football, right? We talk about, a lot of folks talk about college football personalities, right? The old guard, and I think Lou Holtz represented that definitely, and was certainly, a coach that will be remembered, at least on the field. And, a lot of folks bring up other things about him, about, again, him going after Ryan Day and whatnot, but I will always remember him being on college football final with Reese Davis and with Mark May, just from once to the last game ended on ESPN all the way until 2 o'clock in the morning. So, a little tribute there to Lou Holtz. He'll be missed. Next up here, reasonable expectations. We've been doing this new segment here. We've done several teams now, actually. We've done Florida State, Oklahoma, South Carolina, USC. Now we're doing Oregon. What are the reasonable expectations for Oregon in 2026? Well, you just came off a college football semifinal appearance, the second time in school history. First one was all the way back in the 2014 season with Marcus Mariota. So coming off that, the year before that, you lose in the first neutral site round of the playoff to Ohio State. So you've been in the playoffs both times, and you've had Dan Lanning around for a long time now. I think a lot of folks understand who Dan Lanning is. I don't think you need to, if you're a college football fan, you don't need to be educated on Dan Lanning. You know who he is. Good coach. They're not saying he's like an elite level coach. He's not like a tier 1 coach. He's definitely like a tier 2, 2.5 type coach, right? So you know who he is. You know who Dan Lanning is. Been very successful up there. The thing about Dan Lanning in Oregon for this year is that you get Dante Moore back. You've used the portal a little bit. You've recruited very, very well. Based on all that stuff, the expectation should be, if you're the fans, go win the national championship, or at least go a step further, right? We kind of seen this a little bit with Dan Lanning. It's been this very, very, steep climb to where you've been. Now, as people have said before, that the whole adage is progress isn't linear. But for Oregon, it has been so far linear. And the expectation at Oregon and among Oregon fans, from what I have seen, is it needs to go a different level. It needs to go up to the national championship appearance level. But as they say, progress is not linear. So my worry here for Oregon is, look, of course, we'll talk about this probably more as we get to our record projections and things like that down the road. But for Oregon, my concern is with those expectations out there. And look, I understand it. It's reasonable to have that, to say, look, we've made it so far these multiple times. We are expecting a national championship. Here's the thing. You saw what happened to Penn State last year, right? Penn State, very, very similar to Oregon, was sort of this build-up, right? This sort of a build-up of feelings of we should be aiming towards a national championship. That's our goal, and that's what the goal should be, right? Last year was that year. You bring in all these players coming back, several big-time players. You could have gone to the NFL draft, did not, came back for the senior year. And it crescendoed last year. I ironically, because you beat them, and things really fell apart. That's my fear for Oregon. And Oregon could be this year's Penn State, where everything's so much so being built up to where, hey, it's Dan Lanning, it's Dante Moore, he's, rock star coordinator. Not rock star coordinator, but he was back at Georgia, but rock star defensive head coach. He bringing in all this talent. But here's the thing: there are cracks to be seen there. They have a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Now, look, Dan Lanning's done a good job of replacing coordinators, right? He had Kenny Dillingham briefly. He leaves. You bring in Will Stein. Okay, Will Stein's been there for a couple years. He's gone. He's at Kentucky as the head coach. You promoted from within. Now, if you want to use the an interesting comparison here, as a Buccaneers fan, the Tampa's done that with Todd Bowles, right? We've had several offensive coordinators go, out and come in and come out of the organization. They leave, and Todd Bowles, the coach of the Buccaneers, did a good job of replacing the first one, being Dave Canales, who went to the Panthers, replaced him with Liam Cohen. But Liam Cohen leaves, he goes here to Jacksonville, right? Then he, much like Dave Lanning, promotes from within. I know it's not a clear comparison, but as a Bucs fan, this is probably the best comparison I can make. So just hear me out. So Todd Bowles, when Todd Bowles, when Liam Cohen leaves to go to take the Jacksonville job, he says, okay, we'll promote within, keep the system familiarized, right? We'll bring in Josh Gazard. Well, it turns out that was not the right move, and he ends up getting fired. That's my fear with Oregon, is that, especially on offense. Now, defense, I feel good about, right? I feel pretty confident that will not fall off. Offense, though, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that you promote within and you lose Will Stein. There's no workout. You're going to go ask Tampa fans like me, how did Josh Gazard go? Well, it started out fine, and then it wasn't fine. So that's my word for Oregon, that this whole offensive coordinator transition may not go the way you think. And this whole season, potentially, in the worst case scenario, could potentially be this year's Penn State or this year's Michigan back in 2007, right? Where it just, the expectations were just too high for them. It was just too high. And it just wasn't going to work out. Now, again, we have not seen what the season looks like yet for Oregon. So this is just a possibility. I don't think this will happen, but it is something to at least introduce. Knowing that what we've seen from Oregon, or what we saw from Penn State last year, and we saw from Florida State the year before, that this could potentially happen, right? A bit Florida State a couple years ago, a bit Penn State last year. Who's next? Is it Alabama with Kellen DeBoer? Is it Oklahoma with Brent Venables? Is it Oregon with Dan Lanning? We don't know yet. We'll have to see what the season holds, but I think the expectation for Oregon fans is understandable. They want to get to the national championship. They don't have one yet. They have a Heisman Trophy winner. If all these, high draft picks won all this success, they won the national championship. Oregon fans want a national title. And they think this year's team, with Dante Moore coming back and, retaining, with these young players who stepped up last year are back again, they think this is their time. We'll see. But yeah, reasonable expectations for Oregon. It's a national championship, at least to the fans of mine. Now, for me, we'll see. Again, I floated out this whole idea that they could be this year's Penn State from last year, where the expectations could be too big. We'll see. Moving on here now, we'll wrap up the show. Again, a little bit of a shorter show than usual. I apologize, but it's been a very, very hard week in terms of getting the show prepped. Hopefully, this time next week on Tuesday, we'll have a better show structure. But anyway, again, as we were sort of transitioning here to the final segment, again, subscribe to the channel. Very, very important. Again, the button somewhere down there, be sure to hit that. We are independent media, we're not controlled by a media corporation. So that's our motto here, is to not be controlled by any media conglomerate. And that's what makes us unique. We're still growing our show. We're still getting noticed by a lot of people, but we're still trucking along. And our goal is to build this thing up. And I built it up for the last almost 2 years now. Actually, about to be 3 years now, actually. Getting close to it. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, follow us on the socials. I guess, high top, beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, as I said earlier. Chamber of Commerce. They're going to be really warm too. I guess as we're at it, as we are, this is March for our show, so we don't have since we are this far into the show, we can talk about it. Very, very active pattern for severe storms coming up. Today, starting out in the Western Plains, and tomorrow, the eastern part of the plains, and it's slowly moving towards our portion of the country. But yeah, it's back. And of course, the Storm Prediction Center has introduced your new, semi-upgraded risk outlooks. Not too much different than in the past, just streamlined a little bit. There's some nuanced changes, and who knows, maybe in a extra pod we'll go over those changes. But yeah, that's happening. And of course, today in Jacksonville, it feels like summer out here. I mean, it's warm out. I mean, heck, today actually we're getting a very summer-esque day, which with storms, pop-up storms on the sea breeze out to our west. Not here in Jacksonville, but for our friends on the west, like near towards Tampa, that area along the I-75 corridor, yeah, they're good. They're going to get afternoon storms today. So a very, very odd setup. I mean, it's not odd, but it can happen. I think it happened last year too. But very unique that we're getting a summer preview for those who are on the western portions of Florida. But us in northeastern Florida, southeastern Georgia, all good. Dry, though still dry, but no severe, no thunderstorms. That's good. Anyway, here, last segment of the show. College football what-ifs, historical what-ifs. Got a couple of free guys here, and then we'll wrap up the show. Go through these pretty quickly. First one, going back to Penn State. Just talked about them a little bit. What if Penn State did not lose to Oregon last year, right? So the Penn State-Oregon game, huge game. A lot of folks, including me, once again fell for it and picking Penn State to win a big game. And it wasn't crazy though. The whole, I guess the whole the situation advantage with Penn State being off, and they were hosting a team coming from the West Coast. The whole time situation thing, the body clock, all of it was there, right? It was the whiteout game, it was a late night game, and you still lost the game. And of course, the season unraveled, right? What if Penn State did not lose? What if they actually beat Oregon? Well, I don't think they lose to UCLA. I don't think. I think they do beat Northwestern. I think they probably still lose to Ohio State, but that's their only loss, right? I think that this Oregon loss really was the linchpin of the entire season, right? It's the, taken away. It's like the Jenga blocks. Have you ever played Jenga blocks? You take away the last block, the whole tower is going to collapse. I'm just using Jenga blocks as an example. I'm not using any real world example, okay? Just don't want anyone coming at me in the comments. You can if you want to, but that's what happened to Penn State last year. The whole thing just fell apart with one loss. With one loss on one fateful night there in, I think, was it at that point, late September, early October? But the whole thing imploded on itself like a darn star. If that didn't happen, I think Penn State probably makes the playoff, and they probably, I'm not going to say they win the national championship, but they go back to the playoff, probably back to Indianapolis for the conference championship. I feel pretty confident in that. I feel very, very confident that would have happened. I think James Franklin is still your coach there. I don't think he's getting fired after you go 11-1. Be my guess if you want to. But obviously that's not the case, and, we know what happened. But, yeah, and then, of course, if Oregon loses that game, they have one extra loss. So, what happens with them? I don't think much changes, in my opinion. I think they still go on and make it to the playoff. Now, granted, if everything else stays the same, of course, Indiana has a lot of things have changed, right? The whole butterfly effect, right? So Oregon has an additional loss. Indiana has an additional loss. So at that point, yeah, Indiana probably doesn't win the national championship. Oregon probably doesn't make it all the way to the semifinals, though we don't know for sure. But yeah, in terms of regular season, yeah, a lot of things change, and it's Penn State, Ohio State, and Indianapolis instead of Indiana. So that's a lot of things do change here. The calculus sort of changes though if that happens. So yeah, just that one game changes everything last year. In the Big Ten, the whole Big Ten changes for the most part. Next one is definitely more historical. What if Texas and Oklahoma did not leave the Big 12 to join the SEC? I think the SEC is fine, obviously. I think they'll be fine. Now, granted, will they still add teams like, eventually Clemson or Florida State? Maybe. But if Texas and OU stay in the Big 12 still look as a power conference, at least a major power conference, right? Part of I guess that points to what the P3 instead of the P2. Yeah. They obviously take a stranglehold in that conference. I do think that they would have. Now, of course, you have to deal with the rise of Texas Tech and other programs like Arizona State and Texas Christian, Iowa State. But for the most part, I feel like Texas and OU would have separated themselves still. I think they would have, especially Texas. I know Texas was down for a while, but even towards the end there, their final year in the conference, they won the conference in their final year. So you were already starting to see a massive separation between OU and Texas already. even in their final year, even when OU was down for a little bit. So yeah, I think the SEC would have been fine, but the Big 12 was a bigger benefactor here in terms of them being more relevant. Now they're still relevant now, but they would have been even more relevant with two big brands. Now the last one here, we'll wrap it up here, is what if Auburn did have fired Gus Malzahn in 2020? Well, obviously Malzahn does not go to Florida State to be the coordinator, does not go to Central Florida and be the head coach. Now, quick side note there, what does UCF do? Right when Josh Heupel leaves today, does Nebraska fire Scott Frost and he gets hired back? That's a whole other web of multitude of possibilities. But for Auburn, they keep Malzahn. You will still, I think Malzahn would have been fired eventually. That was sort of a inevitable thing, right? This whole will he, won't he thing every single year. It was going to crescendo. It was going to be a whole, he gets fired and the whole, basically a Auburn-sized nuke gets released into the college football world. So they would have fired Malzahn eventually, but they would have held on to him just a little bit longer. They obviously don't hire Brian Harsin. They obviously don't hire Hugh Freeze. And they don't hire Alex Glesh, right? So you sort of keep Auburn in this, I guess, a continued cycle of, fervor, will he, won't he discussions. I guess you see the continued development of Bo Nix. I'm sure Malzahn would have had to make coordinator changes again. Probably, I know at the time they had, Chad Morris as the OC. Interestingly, he's back at Clemson now. But, you would have had, Chad Morris as the OC probably get fired. He probably would have had some change there. So, yeah, I think Auburn at least probably would have been on the same direction it would have been going if Malzahn was still the coach. I mean, it would have been 8-4, 7-5, maybe an occasional 9-3, 10-2. But I think the one thing that doesn't change is that you still would have had a lot of criticism on Malzahn, and you would have had the constant will he, won't he get fired. That would have always been a constant, I think. And it's that whole poison pill of Auburn, well, not just Auburn football, but college football in general. I think that poison pill would have still existed. So, yeah, I think Malzahn would have been fired eventually. But how you stayed in 2020, I think you still would have gotten, like a 7-5, 8-4 type year in 2021. A bit better than what you had under Brian Harsin, but not that much different. But, yeah, I do think eventually Auburn would have fired him, but it doesn't change that much, really, as I'm trying to tell you. The recruiting was still falling off. The offense is what it is. Yeah, sure, you would have had more consistency and maybe an opportunity for Bo Nix to grow a little bit. But I think for all parties here, whether it's the players at the time or Malzahn or even the fan base, I don't know. I mean, I guess it was probably the best of both worlds here. I think Malzahn got what he wanted. He eventually retires. He's not a coach anymore. So, I don't know. What I'm trying to say here is I don't think much in terms of recruiting would not change. The record on the field, it would have changed a little bit. But, I mean, I think it's just what we've gone out of Malzahn previously, which is a very, very consistent 7-5, 8-4, and an occasional 9-10 win season. So, yeah. And that's it for the show. So, again, we'll be back next week. Again, no extra pod this week. More than likely, we'll be back next week for 2 shows and extra pod. So, until then, and apologies for the short week, but schedules were crazy. Until next week, next Tuesday, we should be back next week. Until then, take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.